Well, we're returning to the book of Ecclesiastes. We're going to be looking in chapter 6 today. Now, I want to recap a little bit about chapter 5. Chapter 6 is within the context of what was begun in chapter 5, where Solomon is talking about wealth and the hazards of having great wealth. He talked about, well, when possessions increase, our wealth increases, there's more mouths to fill. There's more people that you have to take care of. So there are more responsibilities. And this goes into the theme that he continually goes back to, which is about how to have a good life in this world. Now, there is a context, as I have said several times in Ecclesiastes, it's life in a fallen world and how to have a good life. And so he talks about wealth and money. And he says, having a whole lot is not necessarily something that's going to make your life better. As I said, you have more mouths to feed. You may sit up worrying all night, afraid you're going to lose it, and so you don't have any peace. Whereas he talked about the laborer, the man who just works. He works for his daily living. He goes to bed and sleeps. And he's not saying that it's wrong to have money, but he's talking about the fact that so many people pursue that, and it's not necessarily a positive thing in their life. And so then in the latter part of that 5th chapter, he talked about another evil under the sun where a man has great possessions and he loses them on a bad venture. In other words, he makes a bad investment of some kind, foolish investment. And he said, then he leaves his family nothing. And he said, that's vanity. All of these things are fleeting. And so we're going to come then to chapter 6, which is going to continue in this idea. And he's going to say at the beginning of chapter 6, there is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires, yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil. So he speaks of the man who has a lot of possessions. Now, he says God has given him these things. Now, within the context of the book of Proverbs is that God is the sovereign God over all things. He gives wealth. He withholds wealth. If we have the blessings of wealth, it's not just because we were smarter than someone else. God has blessed us with wealth. And so he gives you the picture of a man who has been blessed with wealth, but yet he does not have the ability to enjoy them. Now, he speaks of this, and don't take this as saying, well, God's withholding that. He's speaking of the man's life, the way he lives. Of course, it is under the sovereignty of God, and anything we do, God has either made it happen or he's allowed it to happen, but he's speaking of the man's life. So don't get distracted by that. So he said, God gives him the wealth, but he does not have the power to enjoy it. And he said, this is a grievous evil. This is a terrible thing to have all these blessings and not enjoy it. He goes on. Verse 3, he says, if a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better than he. Well, let's break that down a little bit. He says that if a man fathers 100 children, in other words, he has a large family. And in the ancient world, this was a blessing to have a large family, to have a lot of children. It was a great blessing. That's kind of your retirement plan, because when you get old, your kids support you. It's a little bit different thinking in our modern industrial age. But that was this sign of blessing. Okay, if he fathers 100 children and he lives many years. So that is another blessing, that you have a long life. You live a lot of years. A lot of people didn't, especially in the ancient world, where you didn't have as good a health care. A lot of people died young of sicknesses and variety of things. But he said that if he has these blessings of long life and a big family, yet he's not satisfied with life's good things. In other words, he does not make it his part in life to enjoy the things that God has given him. Now, this is a theme that you see here in this book of Ecclesiastes, that some people have great wealth, but they're so worried. They're so worried they're going to lose it. They're so worried they're not going to have enough. And if they have money, they want even more because they're not satisfied with what they have. And so they're not enjoying it. And he says, if that's the case, and they've not enjoyed it, and he goes on to say, if his soul has no burial. And the point he makes by that is not to say that they leave him out and he's not buried, but having a burial means you've been respected and honored, and your family buries you and puts you away in honor. So it's the idea of respect and honor. If he's lived this long life and he's had these blessings, but he wasn't satisfied with his life, and he ends up having a bad death and no one cares that he's gone. It was said about one of the kings of Israel, kings of Judah, that said when he died, it said he died to no one's regret. That's a very sad testimony. And so that's really what Solomon's saying here. If though this man makes a lot of money, and though he has a big family, yet he doesn't enjoy life, and he basically dies with no honor and nobody's regretting it. He said a stillborn child is better off than he. A child that is not even born. A child born dead is better off, because the child at least did not have this life of drudgery. He goes on to say, for it comes, and he's talking about the stillborn child. He said, for it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. So he's in the Hebrew way of thinking. He said this child is born dead or dies in the womb. He's never seen the life. He's never seen these things. He goes into death, goes into the afterlife with rest. Yet this man has had life, had great blessings in life, but did not enjoy them, and ended up ending his life in a bad way. He said, you're better off. You weren't even born. He says that even though, verse 6, even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to the one place. And when he says go to the one place, he's talking about the place of the dead. And I won't go into the theology of Hebrew afterlife, but people die and they go to Sheol. They go to the place of the dead in the Hebrew understanding of things. So he's saying that the child and the old man who's lived the full life, I shouldn't say it's a rich life, but it was a life full of wealth, but no enjoyment. He ends up in the same place with the child, and the child didn't have to deal with all these things. Now, Solomon is not saying it's good for children not to be born alive. He's making a contrast to make a point. And be sure and get the point, and don't get lost in the analogy that he's making, is that it's a really bad thing if you live a long life and have things that are on the exterior look like great blessings, great large family, great wealth, yet you had no enjoyment. You know, there are a lot of people that have a lot of things, but they don't enjoy them. They're either afraid they're going to lose them, or they're afraid they're not going to make enough, and there's this constant stress in life. And the whole point Solomon makes is to live a good life, is to enjoy your life on this earth. He goes on, verse 7. All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. So he says we're always toiling. I mean, technically we are toiling for our mouth because we toil, we work to get food to eat so that we can survive. But he goes on to say that the appetite is never satisfied. There's always a need for more. Verse 8, for what advantage has the wise man over the fool? And what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. Now that's kind of the point. Better to have what you can have than to be constantly roaming to see what you can do more. And that gets back to this idea of being satisfied with what you have. And the great danger Solomon points out of those with great wealth, it's not all of them because Solomon had great wealth, is that sometimes the great wealth is not enough. You need more and you want more. And so he said, the idea of the poor man that knows how to conduct himself in life is better. Because better is the sight of the eyes, better is to have what you have than to be constantly looking for more and seeking more. That kind of goes back to what was said in the previous chapter about the bad venture. That you had great wealth and you lost it in a bad venture. You made an investment that you thought would pay off. It was risky and it resulted in great loss because you were not satisfied with what you had. And that's a sad thing that happens to many people. He said that better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and striving after the wind. And this is a term he keeps going back to in Ecclesiastes. Vanity, fleeting, striving after the wind. The idea of something looks good but it's of fleeting value. And he says there's so much that people seek after is of that nature. Now let's look as he goes on to verse 10. Whatever has come to be already has been named. And it is known what man is and what he is not able to, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. Now he's going to kind of now move this in a philosophical direction. Keep in the same thought that he's placed in your mind about wealth and enjoying life and living a life. And he's going to kind of think of it philosophically, And it says, whatever has come to be has already been named. In other words, there's nothing new under the sun. Solomon says that in another place. Nothing is new under the sun. People say, he said that earlier in the book of Ecclesiastes, people are always going after some new thing. Today, people want to go after some new thing. And the fact is, there's no new thing. Oh, there are new technologies. There's new wrappings around the old things. But if you study history and you study motivations and what people did and how they did it and why they did it, you find there's nothing new under the sun. There are just different circumstances in which the old things crop back up again. And so he said that whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. In other words, we all have built-in limitations in life. God has granted us abilities. He's also given us limitations. There are others who are stronger than us in certain areas. God may have given you a gift in a certain area of life. You may be very talented in one area, and yet you have a friend who is very talented in another area. And that's just the way God has ordered the world. And God has ordered his church that way with spiritual gifts, that he has spread them out. But the point he's making is that we all have built-in limitations. And according to that, I'll say something humorous here. That great theologian Dirty Harry from a Dirty Harry movie said a man's got to know his limitations, and that's true. We have to know our limitations. And so he said you can't contend with someone stronger than you. You got to know what your limitations are. Verse 11, the more words, the more vanity. And what is the advantage to man? the more words. We get in disputes. We get into, he said you're not able to dispute with one stronger than you, but we keep talking and we keep disputing. And sometimes we can't shut it off. You see this especially in social media sometimes, where people get into disagreements and nobody ever wants to admit that they're wrong. And so he says, what is the advantage, the more words? Really, it's no advantage. And he goes on, verse 12, for who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of the vain life which he passes like a shadow. Now, notice that question. Who knows what is good for a man? Well, in this vain life, this fleeting life that only lasts for a short time. So hold on to that question. Who knows what's good? And then the second question he asks as he closes this chapter, for who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? Another question. Now, he's speaking of limitations. We do not know sometimes what is good for us in our own self. We certainly do not know what's going to come after us. But the point that Solomon is making, and it's always a statement under the current, under the cover, and he makes it more and more explicit as he goes along, is that life must be lived under the authority of God and in accordance with God's commands. And so when he says that, who knows what's good for a man, or who knows what's going to come after, well, obviously no man knows fully. But God does. And God's word and God's truth teaches us what the truth is. So he's really saying, he's closing off, and one of the commentators, Derek Kidner, said this, he is closing off all avenues except the avenue of faith. The only way to live this life successfully is to live it in faith and dependence upon God. And then Solomon says in that context, it's still, enjoy the life that God has given you. It is a great tragedy to waste this life in constant worry, and yet so often we do. So often we get caught up in worry. We get caught up in concerns when God said he would take care of us. And it is a sad thing, and we've all found ourselves doing this. But he gives us these negative examples of, if you have a lot of wealth and you don't enjoy your life, it's worthless. And then he gives you the counterexample of someone maybe who doesn't have very much, but they enjoy their life, they enjoy their family, they enjoy the good things God has placed in this world. God has created a world for man to enjoy. And so we are to enjoy it, and God wants us to enjoy it. And the best way to enjoy it is to live a life of faith to him, and he will make that more explicit as we go on in this book. And so money, how you deal with it, how you live with it, how you die with it, is important. But more important is how you live your life in this world. Do you enjoy the things that God has given? And that's what he desires for us to do. Well, I hope this has been a blessing today. I've enjoyed teaching this. We will get back the next time with another one. I pray that God will bless you on this day.